And for the third video of the day, I'm going to go over how to use Durham's Rock Hard Water Putty. It's basically really cheap sort of wood filler that you can get at most local hardware stores in the US, and it's really cheap. It's like $2 or $3 for a little can of it, and then for 4 pounds of it, it's like $8 or $9, and it goes a pretty good distance. And there's a few reasons that I like this. One, it's really easy to mix together. It's just a powder, and you add water until you get whatever consistency you want. So the flexibility of consistency is also another reason I like it. So I'll mix up like really thick goopy batches with less water, and I'll use those for filling large cracks or large blemishes. Or I can add a little bit more water and do some finer detail work of, smoothing layer lines on a 3D print with a little bit more detail, or just sort of paint it over the whole thing in a thin layer to help reduce layer lines once I sand it down. Apart from being pretty flexible in terms of consistency, it's easily sandable, and it's not fumey at all. As far as I can tell, the stuff is pretty non-hazardous as far as stuff that's often used in 3D printing. You just want to make sure that when you're spooning it out, you're not like breathing the powder into your lungs. But once it's mixed with water, it seems pretty safe as far as I've researched. The other thing that I like about it is that you can brush it on with a paintbrush. And oddly enough, it's actually easier to wash out of your brushes than usual acrylic craft paint that I use, which is weird, but I will totally take that. And this, apart from just being convenient, also means that there's less consumables with, brushes and stuff that you're throwing out, or like single-use items, than something like epoxy. It also has a relatively fast cure time, so it's not as fast as some of the 5-minute wood putty fillers, but it will dry usually in a few hours, even if you're doing a relatively thick coat, and if you stick it in front of a fan or something like that, it dries even faster. And the other thing that I like about this is actually the fact that it has a longer working time than a lot of other things I've used. So I've tried 1 or 2 Bondo products, and they smell like death. But that aside, they also dry in 3 minutes, which is great if you need something to dry in 3 minutes. But usually for my applications, I'm doing stuff that I need a little bit more working time, or I like a little bit more working time, where I don't need to keep mixing up super noxious smelling goop every few minutes. So the Durhams is lasts longer, and it's also faster to mix if I do need another batch. So the other thing that I also like about this, it's kind of weirdly strong. I've used it to patch 1/4-inch holes in 3D prints with no extra support material. I've literally just filled the hole with Durhams, and it stands up to wear and tear surprisingly well. I've also used it, I carved a while back some floral foam horns, and basically ended up coating them in Durhams as the only real structural support. And while wearing said horns, I may have tripped, stumbled, and smacked my head into a wall. So basically I smashed the horns into a wall with my head, and they were completely undamaged, which was strangely shocking, but also really nice, because I didn't need to remake new horns in the middle of a VFX shoot. So just some random other things that I've noticed about working with Durhams. If it does start, if you're working with it for a really long time, I'll mix multiple batches in the same cup, but if you notice that it's starting to cure in that cup, don't add more. Pretty much no matter how much you add or how much water you put in, it seems like once it starts curing to a certain level, it accelerates the curing of even any new powder that you put in. So do be aware of that. Again, if it starts curing, just grab a new cup. Once it's cured, though, I've mixed new Durhams in over cured Durhams, and that's been completely fine. It just seems to be that weird, halfway point that causes issues. I love Durhams. It's probably going to be the thing I use for most times, but there are a few downsides that I do want to mention, just so you guys are aware of them. So, it's not great if you need really thin layers, or sometimes even thicker layers. If you're going to hit it with a really, really aggressive Dremel tool, usually it's fine for hand sanding, but if you go to Dremel it, it seems like maybe the speed or the vibrations of the bits will sometimes crack off little parts of the Durhams towards the edges. Not so much if you have a really thick clump of it, but if you've filled a hole and then maybe feathered a little bit around the hole, sometimes it'll crack off those thinner layers of Durhams around the edge. And I found that usually a little hand sanding over it will sort of smooth out the remaining layer. And it's not been a huge issue, but it does happen, and it is something to be aware of when using the product. And by far the largest negative for me is every once in a while, and I've yet to figure out what causes this, but it'll sort of randomly fall off of a 3D print that I'm working on. So I don't know if that's just due to maybe I didn't let it dry enough, or I put too many coats of paint on it once or something like that, or I was sanding too aggressively. I've used it on thin prints, and I was like, maybe if the prints are super flexible or something like that, it would, cause issues. And like, if the Durhams isn't flexible, when you bend the print, it will crack or something like that. But every once in a while, seemingly for no reason, it'll just sort of fall off a print. And I say fall off, usually it'll be, you're sanding it or you're like handling it in some way and then it starts falling off. I've never just had it start sloughing off for no reason. But I've yet to figure out what causes that. It's only happened twice in all of the times I've ever used it. But it is really frustrating when you're like, I'm finally getting done with the filler primer and the sanding, and then you're like, oh god, it's all falling off my print. But that being said, again, it's only happened twice, and I do find that this has been, for me, for the most part, a very, very good product that works most of the time, and is really, really good for, like, patching giant holes in things and stuff like that. And again, it's cheap, and you don't need super crazy respirators, maybe just like a little sand mask or something like that to wear it. So it is definitely something I usually will just sort of keep around, because I find it to be extremely versatile and delightful to work with. And that concludes my third video of the day, and so help me, I need to go eat food. So have fun, go buy yourself some Durhams if you have it available and want to play with something new. It's a fun product. Or don't do that, I don't really care. I'm not sponsored by Durhams in any way, I just really like it. And I'm also cheap, which is part of the reason that I like it.